God created man alone. Now, we know that Hashem didn't mean for him to remain alone. So what he did was, it seems, perhaps, he created that moment in time where man was alone in order to develop a connection with Hashem. Very important. Without a connection to Hashem, we are really lost and alone in this world. And so by creating man without anyone else in the world, so he was alone in the sense, mitzad that, but he was able to be with Hashem in a much more special, much more intimate way. So he wasn't really alone, but he was alone in the world. However, the ultimate purpose of creating man wasn't just to have a relationship with Hashem, but to have a relationship with other people as well. And through that relationship, man is meant to express and mimic, so to speak, God's ways. We're taught that just as God is compassionate and merciful, we are meant to be compassionate and merciful in this world as well. By emulating God's ways, we connect with Hashem in a very, very, very special way. So even though man had this connection to Hashem, from the perspective of the world around him, man was alone. And regarding that point, the Torah says, Lo tov heyot hadam levado. It is not good for man to be alone. So Hashem decides to make him a wife, an ezer kenegdo. Now, the standard explanation of this idea that it's not good for man to be alone and God made him a wife is simply that, that man by himself is lonely and he's not able to share his life experience with somebody. There's an alternative explanation to the verse that opens up a whole other dimension to what's going on over here, and it connects back with really the essence of what man is and what his purpose is in this world. And this is explained like this. Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. We invert the verse. We read it backwards and say that if man is alone, then he cannot be good. What does it mean to be good? Being good in truth is to be like Hashem. Hashem is the essence of good. And what is that essence of being good? So we're taught that God created the world to give of his goodness. In Hebrew it reads, the tev'ah hatov lehetiv, that the nature of the good is to bestow good. So the idea of doing good in Hebrew is from the same word tov. Lehetiv is from the same word tov. So the verb, so to speak, of being good in action is to lehetiv, to be benevolent and do good for others. So what Hashem is essentially saying over here is, as long as man is by himself, he can't really be good, because the essence of good is to be like Hashem. Hashem created the world to give of his goodness, and man was created to be like him and be in a world and give of his goodness to mankind, more specifically to his wife. The very first relationship a man ever, the main relationship that a man has in his life is with his wife. So Hashem says it's not good for man to be alone. I'll make him a wife. He'll share his life with this woman, the man and the woman sharing their life together, and they have an opportunity now to be good to each other. And that's the essence of marriage. We'll see how much it runs to the core of what marriage is really built on. But anyway, based on that, we can appreciate this reading of the verse, Lo tov heyot adam levado, that man cannot be good as long as he's by himself. So Hashem makes him this woman, beautiful, and they live happily ever after. Not. Of course, we know that problems come in marriage. In their marriage, big problem came, the great sin from the tree of knowledge. We have to know that marriage is not, just like a fantasy, a vacation. Life involves a lot of work. Sometimes you argue, but we have to work through all of this. But let's get to the foundation of what it is, the main key ingredient to building a proper marriage. And what does the Torah tell us about this? What kind of light does the Torah shed on the key ingredient to developing a proper marriage? Well, we all can appreciate that without love, there is no real marriage. So we would suggest that love is the foundation of marriage. And of course, with that love comes expressing it, and comes respect and appreciation of one another. But really, the foundation of marriage that unite husband and wife is love. That's why the Torah actually says that man, once God created woman, man leaves his home and becomes attached to his wife. It says, man and woman become one. They become one flesh. They unite as one. And what does the Torah tell us? What does it mean exactly that man and woman unite as one? So interestingly enough, if we take the word one, in Hebrew it's echad. The letters are aleph, chet, and dalet. So the gematria of echad is 13. Very special number. Why is it so special? Because it's the same gematria of the word ahava. So we see the Torah is hinting to us what is the element, what is it that makes man and woman one, is the love between them that bonds them together. And that's why the gematria of ahava, aleph, hey, bet, hey, is also 13. So love and one equal each other. Through love, that's how we unify with our spouse. But what does this mean in a practical sense? So the Lashon HaKodesh, the beautiful language of Hebrew that is built in creation, tells us also what this practically means as well, because the word love, ahava, is rooted in the word hav, to give. So what is real love? So the world thinks, that the more I get, the more I'm going to love somebody. The reverse is actually true. This teaches us that the more we give, the more we will come to love somebody. The more you give of yourself, the more invested you become in that other person, the more you love them. And marriage is the essence of that giving. If the two parties in a marriage are thinking about what I can give to the other, instead of what I can get from the other, then by Mimela, each one gets and each one gives, and you have a harmonious marriage built on true love and true selflessness and true giving. So we see here that ultimately the good that God gives man through marriage is the love developed between them by emulating God, by being a giver to each other. And we see that that's the foundation of marriage. With this in mind, we could bring a verse. Later on in the Chumash, we talk about building a mikdash, building a sanctuary for Hashem. Now, interestingly enough, the Ramban points out that the Beis HaMikdash that we built, the Mishkan in the desert and eventually the Beis HaMikdash in Israel, modeled something. What did that Beis HaMikdash model? So he explains the different things that we had in the Mikdash and compares them to what existed in the tent of Sarah, the Jewish home. Sarah's tent had 3 miracles that we see a model of in the Beis HaMikdash. She had the chalot, the bread that lasted from Shabbos to Shabbos. She had the candles of Shabbos that also lasted all week. And we see in the Beis HaMikdash also there was the bread and the candles in the Kodesh. So we see that really the Beis HaMikdash ultimately models the Jewish home, Sarah's tent. Based on that, we would like to explain the verse, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, and they shall make for me a mikdash, and I will dwell in them, could apply to the husband and wife through marriage. They means 2 of them, the husband and wife, will make God a sanctuary. How so? By building their home. And then God will dwell amongst them in that home. That home will be a holy home where God resides. With this, we can appreciate an even deeper appreciation of the word echad, because one, the letter aleph represents one. So, and the word echad starts with the letter aleph. So if we look at the letter aleph, which we're speaking about now, which represents the oneness of marriage, if you look at the letter aleph itself, so we can divide it into its parts. Each letter has its own parts, which is also by divine design. And we could see that the parts of the letter aleph, if you look at it, there's a yud on top, and then there's a yud on the bottom, and a vav in the middle. And there are 2 fascinating ideas we want to point out in this letter aleph. First of all, if you take the gematria of the yud and the aleph, that's 26, which is the same gematria of the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. But furthermore, the Kabbalists explain that if you take that letter Yud and look at it in its parts, it also represents marriage, because the Yud on top is the man, and the Yud on the bottom is the woman, and the Vav in the middle represents their becoming one flesh, one unit, one entity. And that's the secret of marriage, all represented in this letter Aleph, which again, we said equals love and giving. So we see now that really successful marriage is not only about each person being nice to each other, but recognizing that we're created by Hashem and we must have Hashem as part of our life. That ultimately brings the complete marriage, turning our home from a mundane home to a holy place where God dwells with us in marriage. And of course, if God is with you, then you have peace and happiness. Okay, this brings us to our final idea. Rabbi Akiva says something, a little bit enigmatic. He gives a statement. He says that when man and woman merit, so then God dwells among them. And if they don't merit, a fire will devour them. So what in Hebrew it reads, Ish v'isha, zachu shchina beinehem. Man and woman, when they merit, the divine presence resides with them. Lo zachu, if they don't merit, then esh ochaltam, a fire devours them, eats them up. Now, what's the depth of this idea? What is he telling us? People that when a couple gets married, so sometimes the rabbi stands up or someone else and says, they got everybody, let's celebrate in this wedding, and let me share this idea with you. And he says the same idea, that when the man and woman merit, the Shekhinah is with them. When they don't merit, then the fire devours their house. And everybody sits there smiling and nobody reacts. And I don't understand, why isn't anybody reacting? Imagine you're a bride or a husband, and you just found out that if you're not careful and you don't merit, a fire is going to devour your home. Wouldn't you get up and scream, "Help me! I don't want my home to be destroyed"? But everybody sits there smiling. Nobody asks, what does it mean? What does it mean that if you're zoche, you have peace, and you have Hashem, and if not, you have destructive fire? I'd like to know. I think everybody would like to know. Yet we say this cute idea and forget that Rabbi Akiva is not just saying something nice to say at a wedding or at a Sheva Brachas, but he's trying to teach us something deep here. So let us appreciate this idea from one perspective. At least there are others. I'm going to share with you one. If you look at the name Ish and Isha, so there's a letter Yud in Ish and a letter Hey in Isha. What we're saying is if you strip those letters away, you're left with just the letters Aleph, Shin, Ish, fire. So one would say, okay, very cute. It works with the letters. If you take out Yud and Hey, which is Hashem's name, you get fire. Very nice. But obviously the Torah is not random like that. When God created Ish and Isha, he picked which letters that should be in their names. And when this idea is being expressed, it's because specifically by taking out Hashem's name, you're left with Ish. So what is fire all about? What is this fire? So the Svarim Kedoshim, the holy books, explain to us that man is made up of 4 elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. One of them is fire. These 4 elements, earth, wind, fire, and water, are the source of our negative character traits. Because the physical body, as a result of the first sin, is mixed with good and bad. Therefore, it has a mixture, and we have inherited some negativity. That means these 4 elements come with a level of negativity, which lean towards negative character traits. We're not going to discuss them all, but fire we will discuss. So what is the negative character trait that's connected with fire? Haughtiness. Thinking of oneself too much. Being selfish. That is what's rooted in fire. Of course, anger as well. But the main thing now we're going to focus on is the idea of being haughty and selfish, thinking of oneself too much. That's the fire. So let's imagine 2 people come to this union of marriage, but they're thinking about themselves. They come with their fire. They come with that negative character trait of thinking of themselves, being selfish and being, haughty. Does that sound like a good ingredient for harmonizing the 2 into one and building a beautiful, loving home of pure giving? No, because each one's thinking about themselves. So if you take away Hashem's name, you're left with fire, which equals each one thinking about themselves, being selfish, and this could start fights and kaas, anger, and that's going to block the shalom in their home. But if you add Hashem's name, which goes back to what we started saying, Hashem's name represents the idea that he's going to be with you. That's the Aleph, with the gematria of Yud Kei Vav Kei, with Hashem's name. But if you recognize Hashem and you bring him into the union, which means we emulate his ways. We realize that God made man to be like him, to be a giver, to be selfless, to give love, to unite through that love. Then you have a harmonious marriage. And with that, you should hopefully live not happily ever after in a sense of a dreamy, make-believe world, but live happily ever after, working hard at building a beautiful marriage and home, raising beautiful children, going in Hashem's ways. Chazak u'baruch.